Hi guys, today I'm here with my May reading wrap up. So I read 9 books in the month of May. Really happy with the overview of what I consumed, I guess. I have a little bit of a flick through for you guys so you can see the reading stats, which I will include now. So yeah, generally I had, you know, a decent amount of genres and like non-fiction, you know, versus fiction. I picked up a few different things than I would usually pick up, so glad about that. I also had 3 buddy reads, which I was very excited to partake in. So the first of those buddy reads, and the first book I finished in May, is The Magician's Apprentice by Trudy Canavan, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. This one released in 2009 by Auber and is adult fantasy. I read this as a buddy read with my friend Deborah on Hills of Books on Instagram, and this is like the final book really that we're reading that's set in this this world. So you guys have probably seen me talking about Trudy Canavan for the last like 6 months at this point. We've pretty much been reading each of her series together. So we read well, the series that are set in this world. So there's 2 trilogies. We've got the Black Magician trilogy and then the Traitor Spy trilogy, and then this book is kind of like just an extra, not really a standalone, but kind of like standalone from the main series, kind of giving you some more context in the earlier start of the world, and it was really awesome. I think it was such a great kind of, I don't know, a proper closure. Like, I'm glad that we decided to read this after finishing the trilogy, particularly because we both felt a little bit disappointed with how it all ended. So it was nice to come back to this and get so much more out of it, content wise, and just kind of really give us a general love again for the series. So I won't go too much into depth about the actual plot of the trilogy. I feel like I've spoken about them tirelessly over the last few months. So in terms of this particular book, again without any spoilers, I feel like it expanded so much in terms of the history through a lot of different perspectives that we got, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I loved kind of piecing together how things came to be in later books, so that's another reason why I really enjoyed coming back to this one, because I could kind of see how things escalated in the like the more linear timeline that I was familiar with from the other trilogy, and also kind of piecing together maybe famous names that I had read in the later books that are like, I don't know, discussed here, like they haven't made their claim to fame yet, that sort of thing. And again, it restored my earlier disappointment in the kind of climax of the final book of the final trilogy, so I'm glad that we picked this up last. I don't really have anything to talk about negative. Like, I pretty much enjoyed everything about this. I really loved this. Glad that I have read that, and glad to have kind of had that experience as a buddy read with Deborah. Alright, next up is another buddy read. So this next book I have read with Gem from Read a Book Gem on Bookstagram and Booktube, and that is Dracula. So this actually ticks off one of my classics. At the beginning of the year I said that I wanted to read about 8 classics and kind of focus on those, because it's just something that generally scares me. I am easily intimidated, either if it's just a big chunky one or the language is not the language I'm used to, and just I feel like, I don't know, there's a lot that goes into a classic that you think, oh, it's not for me, but that is not true, and particularly in this case it's not true, because I thoroughly enjoyed this. So if you do want to see the classics that I wanted to get to this year, I will link the video for you there. So this one I gave a 4.5 stars, originally released in 1897 by Penguin. Well, this particular edition is Penguin English Library, and it's gothic horror adult classic. So I think a lot of you guys know what Bram Stoker's Dracula is about, but for those of you who don't, we are following quite a few different perspectives really. The main one and the kind of beginning person you follow is Jonathan Harker, who he kind of works in like housing and like the buying of properties and that sort of like the market there. And he goes to a client on behalf of his boss's kind of business venture in Transylvania to kind of who's Count Dracula, and kind of gives him, you know, all the information he needs about moving to London, the area, what he needs to know about going across the country and stuff like that. But obviously there's more to it than that. Everyone knows Dracula is a vampire, and a lot of crazy stuff ensues. But what I didn't realise was that we get quite a few different perspectives in this, and I really enjoyed that, because you kind of piece together the story through their different, kind of like the Magician's Apprentice actually. You piece together the story from all their different perspectives and kind of see how everything connects. The atmosphere in this was perfectly executed. I felt like a really eerie coolness, you know, kind of over the back of my shoulder when I was reading this, and just the way it just felt really gothic. Like, I loved how that all came together. I also really enjoyed the non-traditional writing style. We have a really kind of unique way of telling a story. We have it through kind of mixed media, I guess, through diary entries, letters, like invoices, that sort of stuff. Like, it's really, really interesting. I feel like it makes each person's perspective kind of unique to them as you're reading from, you know, a diary entry of this particular character, but in this particular character you're only seeing snippets of them through how other people are describing them. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just really a unique, nice way to kind of get the story across. I think my favourite perspective was probably Jonathan Harker's, just because, you know, he was the character that you were with from the beginning, and he's the one that kind of lived in all the drama and all the like creepiness from the start. So I feel like he's got like a special place in my heart. I will say, in terms of things that I didn't get on board for, and the probable reason why it didn't get a full 5 stars, is I found the descriptions of the women in this book to be really creepy. Like, they describe them to be like childlike and innocent, but then they'd be romantically interested in them, and I just felt like that sounded like borderline predatory. Exploring the idea with Gemma and paraphrasing, what I remember her saying is, you know, I would hope it's kind of to just bring to light more how nefarious the activities of Dracula are in comparison to these kind of innocent young, you know, women, and kind of to contrast and compare the atrocities that's been happening, which I really like that way of thinking. But I still can't get the sour taste of my mind out of my mind that, ew, like, you're describing these women as pure beings and very childlike, and you want to look after them, but then you also want to marry her. Like, it was just strange. So that felt, I don't know, very of its time maybe, I'm not sure. I also found with this that the pacing in the last 3 chapters was very strange. Like, we were building up to this climax, we was building up to this final battle, and it was just over. Like, it was just, it's almost like Stoker ran out of fuel. You know what I mean? Like, he was teasing us so far along to get to this point, and then it was just done, and it wasn't as satisfying as I would have hoped it to be. But nevertheless, my first reading of Dracula, another classic down. Absolutely enjoyed this one. Next up, I finished my 3rd buddy read of May, and that was Secrets of the Star-Crossed, the Once and Future Queen, book 1 by Clara O'Connor. This one released on the 21st of January 2021 by One More Chapter, which is part of the HarperCollins book imprint, and it's YA fantasy / dystopia. So I read this with Deborah from Hills of Books on Bookstagram, and I think we both just really didn't like this one. I gave it a 1 stars personally. I did have this, I think we both had this as a NetGalley e-arc, so I mean it ticks one off of that, but unfortunately we both really didn't enjoy this one. So it's disappointing, because I think it's a trilogy, and I'm pretty sure all of the books are available to read now, but I will definitely not be continuing on with this series, unfortunately. And it sucks because it had such an interesting concept. So we're basically in, like, imagine a modern day Roman Empire in London, with like, you know, extreme technology, but also like the threat of magic. And it just sounded like really intriguing, but in execution it was just confusing. It just really didn't work. I think the only thing that that kind of had it going for it was the interesting concept, but that was it. The concept was just nothing. It wasn't really executed well, unfortunately. For me, the real big irritations were that the characters read too young. So I feel like the author almost aged up the characters, because they read like 15-year-olds, and I don't mean that in a condescending way or anything like that. What I mean is, your classic YA tropey kind of love triangle with your 15-year-old. Like, if it was that, yeah, I could have enjoyed it for what it was. I used to love reading that stuff, and I still do if I'm going into it expecting that. But I was shocked to find out that our main characters are like 24 and 26, but they really do not act at that mental maturity, if you know what I mean. Like, it just threw me off. So I feel like the characters were aged up in a way to include some more like sexual scenes, so it wouldn't have been like creepy, do you know what I mean? But the rest of it, they just read really young, really naive. It just felt tropey and just not what I was after. Everything was just too convenient, everything was just too obvious. I feel like they really just chucked in too much of everything, because we had the Roman Empire, but we had all this technology, but then they also brought in like other historical events like the medieval ages and like Tudors and like the War of the Roses and everything like that. And to be honest, my knowledge of that isn't as good as when I was at school. However, it's like, I'm pretty sure Deborah said this in one of her reading wrap-ups on her page on Instagram, but it's like, surely these things wouldn't have happened if the Roman Empire had still prevailed. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was, how could that part in history have happened had this been, it just didn't make much sense. So I feel like there was too much chucked in there that just didn't work. And I think for me, it was even more saddening that it didn't work well for me, because at the end I read through the author's kind of ideas for the story and where she was going for it, and it just sounded like such an awesome concept. But I'm reading what she, like, you know, her thought process and stuff, and I said, but where's the evidence of that? Where is that? Where is this? Because I've just read a complete different book, you know? So unfortunately, not for me. I'm not really interested in reading anything else from this author or picking up the other books in this trilogy, but that's not to say that you guys won't like it. I don't know. But yeah, ruling that one out. 1 star, unfortunately. Next up, I read Domain by James Herbert. This one originally released in 1984, so another classic. I should put this on my classic book list, but I didn't. I think in my head I'm thinking it more of like horror, which it is, but it's also classic, I guess, like modern classic and adult, published by Pan Books. So I gave this one a 3 star, and this is another series that I have sort of been talking about over the last couple of months, so I don't want to bore you too much, but it's basically the last book in the Ratch trilogy. Now, there is a graphic novel, I believe, called, I can't remember what it's called, The City, I think, but I'm not really interested in picking that up, especially with my mixed kind of thoughts on this one. So the Ratch trilogy I've spoken about a lot, as I say, so I won't go too much into depth about the actual plot, but just briefly about this book. I really enjoyed seeing the aftermath of the destruction that happened at the start of this book, and I enjoyed the cast of characters. However, I just felt like, in comparison with the other 2 books, which I absolutely adored, it just felt really flat. The disturbing scenes in this one, for some reason, just hit me really hard. I don't know if I was feeling more sensitive at this time, or if the descriptions of all the gore and brutality was just way too much this time round that I couldn't stomach it. But whatever the reason was for that, I just felt really put off reading it, and I could feel my face proper bunching up in like disgust reading it. I think it kind of went a little bit too far, maybe into the torture porn kind of category of descriptions. And again, the storyline of this felt really repetitive. I felt by this point in the series I had basically read the same story 3 times. I really couldn't understand how the characters were so shocked at the idea that these rats had still prevailed when it had happened in book 1 and book 2, and they're all in close locality. Like, we're pretty much following London really, and like, you know, surrounding areas. So I don't know why you wouldn't initially assume, shoot, rats. Do you know what I mean? Like, when that's been such a fear for the last couple of years, and there's been some major outbreaks of these man-eating rats, why would you think, oh no, they're gone now, it's fine, I'm not going to be scared? Like, instantly your mind, like, naturally, for a survival instinct, it will kick in and be like, crap, what if it's rats? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But yeah, there was also another plot with like a World War III sort of situation, and that just seemed really random, but I enjoyed seeing the aftermath of that, as I said. But yeah, it was, I'm happy to have finished it, but I almost feel like I could have maybe not have read this one and would have been fine, but I know my curiosity would have like eaten away at me. Do you know what I mean? Like, just a bit frustrating. Alright, so the book that I finished after those is a really teeny one, and that is The Suffragettes. This is number 94 in the Penguin Classics like little black book library thing. This one doesn't have an author, so I don't know who it's actually written by. I think it's just like penguins combined and made it together. This originally came out in 2016. It's non-fiction, and I gave this one a 3 stars. So it is what it says really on the tin. It's about the suffragettes movement, but it's quite cool because it's broken up and kind of shown to you in like original things that they just did. So this, for example, is like a defaced coin that they wrote votes for women on. It's got other imagery like pictures of the posters they used for their movement and stuff like that. So it was cool to see some, you know, photographic evidence of some real examples of the speeches and, you know, the flyers and things like that. And I definitely enjoyed the mixed media aspect of this. But I mean, it's not really accessible for those that don't already know the history well, because it's not very informative. It's more like you kind of need to know already, do you know what I mean? And I don't know a hell of a lot about the suffragettes. I don't really remember being taught it properly at school, but it's just, I mean, it's nice to have if you have a basic understanding, I would say. It's pretty cool to see. The frustrating thing about this is I can't help but notice all the things that's not being said since I read Ain't I a Woman, which really went into depth about all the amazing things the suffragette women did, yeah, but who they excluded, what they wanted and what they didn't want for other women. So yeah, it was okay, but there's better books, you know, that does the job better, I would say. So I forgot that I had another buddy read. I think The Magician's Apprentice, which I read at the beginning of the month, was actually a carryover, so it wasn't actually a buddy read for May, it was just finishing in May. So the actual official third buddy read that I had in May, so I guess it's like 3.5, I guess, is The Land of Stories Book 1, The Wish and Spell by Chris Colfer. Myself and Kat from Kat's Reading Corner on Bookstagram and BookTube read this together. It is a middle grade book released in 2012 by Little Brown Books for Young Readers, and it's like a fantasy kind of fairy tale retelling, I guess. And this is the first of a, I think, 7-book series of the Land of Stories books. I gave this one a 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed this. So we're following twin siblings, Alex and Connor, I believe. Yes, as they are struggling with family problems at home, and you know the regular going to school. One twin is excelling at school, amazing, absolutely adores it. The other twin is kind of flunking, falls asleep a lot, and again this kind of ties into maybe the struggles that they're having at home. Fast forward a little bit and they find themselves falling into the Land of Stories, where they have been read this book from, you know, when they were really young, and now they've found that it's real life and they're stuck inside the book and they've got to find their way home. But yeah, it's such a fun adventure story, so magical. I absolutely love fairy tale stories, and I really love portal magic as well, so combined was just, you know, a very big treat for me. I loved the characters, particularly Alex and Connor, the main characters in this book, having like real life worries and concerns and problems. And I felt like the plot twists were great, especially when you're considering this is aimed at a younger audience. So you'd worry, you don't want it to be too complex, but you don't want to, you know, not give them anything to think about. I think this was balanced really well. Unfortunately, it was just a little bit too convenient, but I mean, hey ho, there's worse things, you know. I really did enjoy this overall, and I believe from this point on we're doing a book a month, which is awesome. awesome. Okay, the next 2 books I read are volumes of manga. So I read volume 1 and 2 of Assassination Classroom by Yusai Matsu. I've probably pronounced that incorrectly, so I do apologise. Are both released by Shonen Jump, sci-fi comedy YA manga. They both, I think one came out in 2012 and 2 came out in 2018 maybe. I might be incorrect. These editions were, at least, I'm not too sure. The first one I gave a 3.5 stars and the second one I gave 4 stars, and it's a really fun, quirky, random story. Basically, this alien has destroyed the majority of the moon, and he basically threatens to do that to the Earth at the end of the year. However, he gives them a chance to assassinate him whilst he teaches them. So by the time they've graduated in a year's time, if they've not killed him successfully, then he will destroy the Earth. It's so bizarre, but it was so much fun. So yeah, I really enjoyed these. Super wacky, super entertaining. The second one I really enjoyed getting to know the characters a little bit better, and I like seeing the teachers' lessons actually paying off, because you know, when you get to the heart of it, it's actually teaching them life skills, and it's quite cute to see. I will say though, in volume 2 there's like this new character that comes in, and it's such like there's this display of such inappropriate behaviour of a teacher with a student that's just unnecessary, and it made me like very uncomfortable. So I feel like if that was cut out it would be perfect, but I can only imagine that continuing, maybe getting worse as the volume goes off, as the volume continues, sorry. So that's the only thing that I really didn't like about it. And then the last book, which was my favourite book of the month, even though it took me 2 months to get to, or 2 months to finish, sorry, is Aftershocks, Dispatches from the Front Lines of Identity by Nadia Owusu. I got this through NetGalley as well, so thank you to them. Of course, opinions are all my own. This released on the 4th of February 2021, and it's a non-fiction biography published by Hodder and Stoughton. And I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. So this is basically a memoir of sorts, but it's not just a memoir, like it's tied in with history and like earthquakes. It's just more than a biography. Like there's so much being discussed, you know, and I think that's one of the main things I adored. There's so many more like wider topics that are talked about, such as identity, grief, abandonment, this connection that Nadia has with earthquakes in relation to, you know, like a metaphor for her life, but also literal earthquakes and literal natural disasters that have happened and affected her. It was lyrically woven and written. It was just beautiful, beautiful. I actually had picked it up. I wanted to read it anyway, obviously, but I picked it up specifically last month, or 2 months ago now at this point, for the Book of Sins book club pick. I didn't get to finish it in time, but I feel like this is the kind of book that I'm happy that I took my time with, and happy that I kind of dipped in and out of it, because it was quite emotionally draining and distressing to read about a lot of the hardships that Nadia faced. But it was, yeah, I'm glad that I took my time with it. I will say though, I was a little lost at times with the non-linear storytelling. We do go quite, you know, back and forth a lot with different ages that she was, or different places like that she grew up in, and kind of, it's not like in order. But I mean, if this is how she wants to tell her story, who am I to judge, you know? Just from a reading perspective, it felt a little bit confusing at times, you know? And yeah, that is it for the wrap up. I'm so happy with the, you know, the amount that I read, the quantity, quality. Very, very happy with the books here. Also for June, I just wanted to mention that I am taking part in the Read Caribbean. I mentioned Book of Sins a minute ago. She is hosting for the 3rd year running her Read Caribbean month throughout the whole of June, which is Caribbean Heritage Month, and I'm taking part for the first time, which I'm really excited for. So stay tuned on my Instagram for, you know, just a little introduction of what Read Caribbean is. Follow Book of Sins on Bookstagram as well, on Twitter. You know, subscribe to her newsletter and stuff like that. She's always full of, you know, reading wildly, reading Caribbean, you know, reading more, just reading in general, and she has a lot of awesome recommendations on her page. So that's what I'm sort of focusing on this month. I thought I'd quickly, I don't know if I want to give you a June TBR because I don't really know what I want to read. Okay, so I think the two main books that are Read Caribbean, whether they're a Caribbean author, it's set in the Caribbean, the author is on Caribbean heritage but lives elsewhere. I think the two books that I mainly want to get to this month in June is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I've already got a bookmark in here ready, and Love After Love by Ingrid Persword. So these are the two main books. I have got a couple more coming that I ordered from Blackwell's yesterday, and then I also have a general summer TBR that I need to do for you guys. So yeah, June is a busy month, but I'm very excited. So I'm probably going to try and do as much like Caribbean inspired content on my Bookstagram if you guys are interested. So yeah, that is officially it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you in another one soon. Bye!